Respected Chairperson of this session, Dr. Vijay Kulkarni, Honorable Members on Dais, Dr. Rakesh Kumar, Director of NERI, eminent scientists and government officials, representatives of industry and academia. I am indeed grateful to the organizers for providing me with this opportunity to share some of my views. I've been a student of botany and I was very fortunate to start my research as early as in 1986 to study mangroves of Mumbai. And Sorabji Godrej, who was a visionary industrialist who wanted to protect mangroves of Vikhroli Ghatkopar region, almost 4,500 acres of land, which was under mangroves then and still continues to be under mangroves. I had a chance to work in that area for my PhD, and that was the time when I started looking at mangroves very critically. I traveled entire coastline of Mumbai, including Andaman and Nicobar as well as Lakshadweep, on motorcycle on the mainland, almost 125,000 kilometers. And I was able to understand the dependency of people, which changes as per the cultures, and also the composition of mangroves on east and west coast and their distribution pattern I was able to understand. Fortunately, I had a chance to start my career with MS Swaminathan, and we looked at climate change issues right from the situation when people were not even coming to terms with the terminology of what we call it as climate change those days. And we looked at anticipatory research and other things. Why I'm trying to tell you all this is because in the advent of CRZ in 1991, Government of India had in place a committee called National Committee on Mangroves and Coral Reefs. I became one of its members, member of that committee from 1992 and served the committee for 5 years. As an ecologist, my livelihood was research, which continues to be the same. And I strongly believe that many times when it comes to livelihood dependent opportunities of work, you are probably more honest to what you are doing. And I worked with NGOs for 14 years and then with university now for last 9 years. What I'm trying to tell here is the issues of mangroves and the CRZ, the science of CRZ. It has changed with the perception of people who define policies. It has changed with the perception of people who are in politics. It has changed with the perception of people who are academicians and try to look at these issues more and more critically. Cities like Mumbai are probably the biggest losers in this game because people are not in a position to understand what should be the priority for our country. And in a country like India, conservation is always dependent on the political will. So I am making a very, very subjective statement, and that has been a fact. So let us not say that, if we are able to develop a consensus, thanks to the very strong approach of NGOs of late in last 20 years, Mangrove Society of India, which was formed in 1990. Still, situations have not changed. As Dr. Vijay had mentioned, many things are still dependent on the political will. You take example of Sindhudurg district. If I represent Sindhudurg district as a politician, I belong to one party, and I change a party, and then my priorities for the same district, which has been probably declared as a tourism district, they change. And I believe that for the development of that region, only industries are the solution. I am not aiming at anybody, I am only giving this as an example. 1971, we plan a city like Navi Mumbai, a visionary decision of the government. The entire city is below the high tide line, even below the average sea level in 1971. For achieving conservation in true sense and saving the money, the government decides to reclaim the entire land in such a way where they adopt the Dutch method of reclamation, where you actually construct dikes so that the reclamation which is done, even if it is below the average mean sea level, you are saving crores and billions of crores of rupees and dollars by going for that practice, so that even still the city is below the average mean sea level. But the dikes take care of protection of the coastline, the water is not entering, and they are maintained properly. 40 years down the line, many areas which have been earmarked as early as in 71, like Second International Airport. Suddenly 1991 comes, as Dr. Vijay showed, one high tide line shifting. Today's situation is CIDCO, for example. They are basically the planners for making money and then developing the city. It is not that they have got funding for that separately. 1,400 hectares of land just goes down the line between 1991 and 2011 CRZ, shifting of high tide line, costing equivalent of 55,000 crores. So science of CRZ has to be understood properly. And mangroves is the only factor which is deciding that. We have been talking about various aspects, but ultimately that's one community of plants which is deciding the future of everything, every development. And what are mangroves ultimately? They are a group of plants which can be trees, which can be shrubs, which can be ferns, which can be palms, and which can also be grasses, which grow in a region which is inundated by high tide water. So it is called intertidal region, right? And intertidal regions of tropical belt are occupied by the group of plants which are called mangroves. Now you have a grass species of mangrove which is coming in an area which is traditionally a rice cultivation area, and the varieties of rice which are growing naturally in the intertidal region are also mangroves. So the entire belt from Poynad to Nagotne, along the road there is a Dharamtar upstream region, creek. And traditionally people are growing the salinity tolerant rice. Now scientifically if you talk about it, it is a mangrove because it is a intertidal region, because the bunds are broken, they are not maintained by the Kharland Development Board, water is entering, and you still do not know that, okay, that is also CRZ1, some NGO or some individual finds out, okay, this is also CRZ1, and some development is taking place, you file a PIL. So there has to be a kind of understanding of science of CRZ, number one. Why I call this group of plants, they are very important because there are 97 species all over the world and about 50% in India. But few species which are highly tolerant to any kind of extreme conditions of salinity, even though mangroves require tidal conditions, substratum type, wave action, temperature, precipitation, there are 6-7 aspects which are attributes for normal growth of mangroves. But ultimately, certain species like Avicennia marina, for example, or species of Avicennia, they grow anywhere to the salinity levels of 115 parts per thousand, 3 times more saline than the seawater itself. In extreme conditions, you have abundant fish ponds and you still get mangroves. You can reclaim those fish ponds, restore them with mangrove plantations. We established technologies for cultivation of mangroves. The technology has got different angles. There is a school of thought, you maintain or manage the land in such a way that the tidal water starts coming in and you don't have to plant anything. Mangroves will automatically will come. That's a fact. So the developmental processes which have altered the entire geography of our city of Mumbai, it has been altered for last 350 years. When the Nariman point was developed, in Sasavane village, there was inundation of water for 3 days. 8 feet of water was there in 1956. The newspaper records have photographs of that. But we don't think that it is a violation of any rule. Suddenly 1991 comes, all NGOs, 80% of our NGOs in our country are not functional. There are more than 40,000 NGOs probably registered. But individuals who attain a name, the NGOs are run on their names. And many a times after them, NGOs are just nowhere. So you require money to run NGOs and you have ways of generating funds, genuinely or otherwise. So if you are talking about the development of a city and a role of a citizen, then there has to be a proper approach for conservation. I will just highlight few more points. What I'm talking about is mangroves, the role of them, land building, coastal protection, protection as a bioshield from any kind of attack of natural manner, natural source. But besides that, mangroves also are now defining boundaries of developmental changes or any anthropogenic pressure. And these species, they have a unique ability to act as bioindicators, where a particular species starts suddenly growing and you can make out that that area is under tremendous anthropogenic pressure. But besides that, what is happening is we are not in a position to differentiate between the role of mangroves for which CRZ has been actually defined. If you're talking about mangroves, there are two types of broadly definable mangroves. Of course, there are exclusive and non-exclusive species, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about inland mangroves and coastal mangroves. You take any developmental process, coastal mangroves are the ones which are facing the seashore, facing the intertidal regions of mouths of rivers, where there is a tremendous possibility of attack from the natural phenomena like cyclones or wave action. And there are mangroves which are not only stopping the coastal erosion, but they are also protecting the shoreline, and they are actually land builders. If you protect the shoreline areas, you will find the accretion process and the sedimentation process. Towards the sedimentation process, the land keeps on building because the mangroves keep on regenerating naturally. And that is what is the true role of mangroves in the areas which are facing the sea, which are having ecological threat of nature. But there are many areas which are actually probably the canal which has been constructed for some other purpose, like developmental purpose. And suddenly you find the sluice gate which is constructed there, it is not maintained, and the channel is open for tidal water to enter at the time of high tide. With that, the seedlings of mangroves go there. One seedling is there and it is CRZ1. How do we manage that? And secondly, why again PILs only for the developmental projects of the government or even otherwise? Why not in the zopatpattis which are developed in the CRZ? Because there is no money there. You cannot generate anything there. You cannot oppose it and you cannot stop it, even if you oppose it. So is it a way to stop the development? I don't believe so. We are talking about mangroves, their plantations, compensatory plantation. This city, this very city, in 1989, BSDP, Bombay Sewage Disposal Project, we were talking about maintaining the sewage, managing it, for which the aerated lagoons were constructed. Vivek was working with Godrej. I had gone to Chennai. I studied that area. 200 hectares of mangroves were allowed to cut. And for what? Compensate them with plantation. Now, Godrej foundation area was the only area where compensation of 400 hectare land under plantation of mangroves was feasible. But that compensation, was it going to help any ecological conservation? No. It was just a rule that 2 times more land should be reclaimed or restored by mangroves. So these are also very many issues which we'll have to understand. I don't want to talk about many things except 10 issues I want to highlight because the time is not much. I can give a lot of details later on. The high tide line shifting, which is a major challenge when we're talking about CRZ, science of CRZ, and I mentioned about 1400 hectares of land of SIDCO. It has just gone because of shifting, because 2011, it is now based on 5 ppt salinity, and that is called CRZ. Now, you measure salinity of water in Mumbai anywhere, the seepage of water through the canals which are actually taking water from city to the sewage, for example, disposal. Bombay Sewage Disposal Project was considered to be successful. It was planned for the population of Mumbai of 1989. When it was actually became operational, still 60% of the sewage of Mumbai is untreated, even after execution of the project. 70% of Thane city's sewage is directly dumped into Thane Creek without treating. What are we talking? Ecological role of mangrove is gone there itself. We are not able to really say, okay, mangroves are there. They are so highly tolerant. Mahim mangroves, you can see they are growing very, very luxuriantly. They are able to absorb highest of the high levels of pollution. Are we able to look at that issue? PILs, I said, PIL can be filed very easily. But for what purpose? For stopping the development? 1991, when the changes of geography were taking place, MMRDA conducted a survey. 1991 and 97, what was the changes taking place, whether mangroves are grown or reduced? Because it was for MMR region. Mumbai Island mangroves were reduced, but there were 2.5 times increase of mangroves. Satellite images confirmed that. But the work which was done by me for MMRDA was challenged by my own organization, BNHS, saying that no, it is not a correct data. Why? Because some of the members of the governing council of BNHS feel that no, mangroves are always degraded in Mumbai, but satellite images cannot speak lie. And after 6 years, everybody agrees, no, that work was genuine. So what I'm trying to say is that whatever developments have taken place, Thane-Belapur, Navi Mumbai railway line, you are laying the track for the city development or for the purpose of benefit of the people. Now entire geographical situation has changed. Hundreds and hundreds of hectares of land have been under now tidal influence. And there the mangroves start coming by natural succession process. So that is how the mangroves are increasing. So can we not talk about a species which is 80% in Mumbai, that is Avicennia, and one sapling is removed for the sake of developmental purpose? We are talking that there is a violation. In 91, these kind of developments take place. The city development authorities go to court by saying that there are 79 locations where 50% of our work was done before 91, and now the changes of the river course and the tidal creek, and we are talking about CRZ1 because their mangroves have started coming. High Court sets up a committee. I was a member. I said, what is the terms of reference, whether mangroves are there or not? Answer is yes. And the PIL filed wins because they feel that, yeah, there are mangroves, there is a violation, stop development. Navi Mumbai International Airport. There are so many examples. I was again responsible for submitting a report, pleading with the central government. Mr. Jairam Ramesh asks me, कितना पैसा मिला आपको ये report positive देने के लिए? मैं बोला, sir, I am a professor in the university, not a single rupee I have claimed for consultancy. He was shocked. He didn't know that I am a professor in the university. He thought that he's talking just for the sake of development. I said, I am a scientific observer of these facts for the last 25 years. I have studied the mangroves of Mumbai very critically. And I believe that even if you remove 165 hectares, you can replace that by undertaking compensatory plantations. But I don't know whether they will be useful for the city, wherever you do it. And recently, I had to plead in the court of law, personally, in my personal capacity, without representing anybody. This is what is happening. Are we developing eco-terrorists? Just for the sake of conservation we are talking? I'm a firm believer of conservation. But Plato, the great philosopher in 15th century, 16th century, he said, conservation is not only protection, it is also development. I don't know that vision the person like him had. And it is still applicable. We have to understand that vision. Third point is policymakers and their roles. An IS officer is a Thane commissioner. Left side of the Thane Creek, as you see from south to north, is completely reclaimed and a coastal road is created, which is post-1991 development. And you have an access to Hiranandani from Thane station, from the jail. The fort of Thane was basically on the coast. Now there are 500 to 700 meters of reclamation and a coastal highway-like road is constructed. And on the right side you have mangroves. But there is one Manisha Nagar, and they say that it is a CRZ violation. When the policy makers have constructed a road by giving justification to the government, right? And the same commissioner or a similar commissioner becomes a forest secretary. He is defending every development in Thane. Now you are a forest secretary, you say MCZMA is the final authority. I have interacted with some of the members. I'm sorry to say a couple of them who are supposed to be on the committee for the knowledge on mangroves, they do not know the role of mangroves. And I'm challenging. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that I am more knowledgeable. You apply any yardstick of science, you will find the flaw in the understanding of mangroves. When the 2006 flood took place, people say mangroves were there and water did not go into the shoreline. Mahim ke mangroves ki wajah se pani ruk gaya and it entered the city of Mumbai. When you have 100 centimeters of rain, what can any even wall cannot do anything. And mangroves cannot stop water. They are basically just stopping the sediments from going to the sea. So they are building the land. So that basic role itself is not known. And you just come out with reports. I do not know what kind of reports. Fourth is nationally important developmental projects. We have to have some yardstick. And for that, all of us, I also represent, I am one of the founder, joint secretaries of Mangrove Society of India, which was founded in 1989. So I know the role of NGOs. I believe, I stand by that. But then we have to also be open and work hand in hand with the government to ensure that location-specific surveys are done when we are trying to think of opposing something. Next point is city planning. You know, the city like Mumbai or anywhere. Now the current managing director of CIDCO feels that, okay, if the Navi Mumbai, which was planned, airport was planned, if it is not going to happen, there is an island, we will develop that island and we will still have an airport there. And there will be a proper non-violation kind of approach. Nobody can stop that kind of a development. But what I'm saying is, we'll have to understand for various challenges, we have to have some solutions. Dr. Vijay mentioned about the proposals of individual housing repair in the CRZ area. How does that person spend 15 lakhs on getting the CRZ clearance? Income generation activities, commercial activities, they can be there, like your prawn culture. That itself was again a major problem. 1991, the rule came, and I remember the then collector of Sindhudurg district. Sindhudurg district and entire Maharashtra, you have funnel-shaped estuaries. So beyond 200 meters, in Sindhudurg particularly, the hills start. So out of that 200, you have 50 to 70 meters of mangroves, then little bit of rice cultivation, and then you have the hills. 500-meter rules, when there were already existing prawn culture ponds, he would put a flag on the top of the hill saying that this is the 500-meter from high tide line, and beyond that you do aquaculture. That was the kind of audacity with which the policymakers have behaved. And the livelihoods of local people, I'm not talking about large-scale commercial prawn cultures, they were devastated completely. Income generation activities, I mentioned legal protection. Again, you'll have to understand how do we really develop that. Then compensation also, the compensatory plantations. For any project, if you say in Gujarat, project is in South Gujarat and they are saying you do plantation in North Gujarat because compensatory plantation should take place. And you have Gujarat Ecology Commission, one of the renowned organizations. They are able to do plantations successfully also. But then something is happening in the south and you are planting 4,000 acres of mangroves in the north. I don't think whether it is a kind of feasible option and alternative. Then conflict between the various governmental organizations like departments. In Maharashtra itself, forest and environment are two different departments when they should be collective. Looking at the issues of other things. Climate change impacts, what are the kind of implications of that? We have not even thought about it. If there is a sea level rise, Dr. Rakesh Kumar himself had studied one such situation. 44,000 crores of rupees will be lost in terms of property if 1 meter sea level rise takes place for Mumbai Island. And 25% of our population will have to be shifted. So if this is the kind of study that we are able to conduct and understand, then we have to also see, with respect to CRZ, what is our role? Because 70% of our population of the world is in 60-kilometer belt of the world, coastal areas. And then you have got mangroves and natural resources, possibilities for livelihoods, and developmental projects also. How do we match these requirements and our compulsions? And lastly, the role of NGOs I mentioned already. And then, of course, the ignorance level I mentioned about that. And finally, I think we will have to understand that there has to be a collective platform involving all stakeholders that all are assembled here. And we'll have to really come out with location-specific policy. If we really can think of that, I think we can achieve conservation, we can achieve development, and both of them actually are part of the definition of conservation. Thank you so much.
Dr. Deshmukh was speaking with so much passion that I had no heart to stop him in between. And what he spoke is from his bottom of his heart. Person who has spent his life in such type of issues, we require that sort of scientific insight. I must thank him because I was worried when he didn't see him pre-test session that Sanjay is missing. Thank you very much. Now I'm inviting Dr. Gupta.
I call the panelists for an informative discussion. I would like to invite Dr. Rakesh Kumar on the stage and offer them with the mementos. Dr. Apurva Gupta. Dr. Vijay Kulkarni. Dr. Sanjay Deshmukh. Shri G.D. Jipurnkar. And Shri Rishi Agarwal.